I know that it's early, but I can already tell what FAMU's best quality will be in 2024. Oh, yeah. It's locked on HBCU. Play my music.
You are Locked On HBCU, your daily podcast covering HBCU sports. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's going on, family? Welcome back to another episode of the Locked On HBCU podcast, your number one daily one-stop shop for everything HBCU athletics, Monday through Friday, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team your team every day. And I, of course, am Darian Gray, aka the Mouth of the South, Texas Southern alum and former TSU Herald Sports editor and current contributing writer at USA Today's Saints Wire. Thank you for going on this journey with me. Make a Locked On HBCU your first listen of the day every day. And remember, just because the mic cuts off does not mean that the journey is over. It just means it's time to follow me on Twitter at South Exclusives. Starts with an S and ends with an S. Today's episode is brought to you by Ultimate College Football Head Coach. This is easily my favorite game that I've downloaded in the last month or so, right? Like, this game is fantastic to me. With that being said, let me tell you a little about it, because it's the brand new mobile game that is completely free and has no ads and is 100% playable offline. So use the promo code LOCKEDONCFB in all caps inside the game store to receive a free boost to your program and begin your coaching legacy today. Today is all about the FAMU versus South Carolina State game. It's about what happened with both squads and then also the fallout of it in that order. We'll look at the HBCU Elite to close out today's show. We'll look at South Carolina State and what they've shown, because it's only game one, but I like some things. They just have to fix one big thing, and I'll like everything else a lot. But let's start off with Florida A&M, because they've played two games. Them and Norfolk State have played the most game of the Division One, and Delaware State have played the most games of the FCS HBCUs. And I have a big takeaway. I believe I know exactly what FAMU's best quality will be in 2024. It'll be their ability to rise to the occasion in the face of pressure. I believe that FAMU's best quality of their team in 2024 is their poise, because it's something that has won them the last two games, and it's something that you will have to have moving forward. There is not a great team without poise. You are not a championship team without poise. Now, we're only two games into the season. You may question, where is the poise coming from? This is about more than just a South Carolina State matchup, because against South Carolina State, they did show poise. But let's be very clear. FAMU is 2-0. There's points in each of those games in which I would thought they would have lost. They easily could be 0-2 right now, and they're not, because every single time they had to rise to the occasion, every single time, take South Carolina State, take Norfolk State, it doesn't matter. Every single time you've had pressure on FAMU, they have risen to the occasion. They have performed. They have shown up. And they said, you know what? We're not going to shrink in the face of this pressure. We're going to rise to it. You know, the whole thing, pressure either makes diamond or it makes colt. This is making diamonds right now. And I made a little bit of a list, a compilation, if you will, of moments in which FAMU rose to the occasion. And I'm going to go in chronological order-ish. You'll see a little bit of a deviation from that at the end of this list. But it's 5 reasons or 5 moments. So against Norfolk State, FAMU was down 14-0. This was going into their second possession. So it was very early into the game. But they were down 14-0. And I don't know if I came on the show and said it. I don't know if I tweeted it out. I don't know if I know I put it in my notes, but I don't know if I made this public. And one thing that was major for me was they had to respond in that moment. I really do feel like I said it on the show, because that was the moment when the offense got it together. And it's very funny because context is everything. The offense finally got it together. It was their second drive of the season, but it was also pivotal. And I don't think that they could have afforded to not put up points right there. It didn't have to be 7. It ended up being 7. It didn't have to be that, though. That's just what it turned out to be. So at that moment, Norfolk State was dominating the trenches. At that moment, Norfolk State was taking anything that they wanted. They came up to him, look, we're gonna run the rock, we're gonna get explosive plays, we're gonna get methodical plays. It didn't matter if you wanted a fast drive, a slow drive. There was absolutely no answer for Norfolk State's offense at that point. And it felt like if FAMU didn't score right now, everything would be lost. Obviously, that's not how the game works. They still had time, but we're speaking purely about momentum and where it felt like they needed what they needed to do. FAMU was down 14-0 to Norfolk State, and they came back and had a phenomenal drive. That's when they started using the misdirection. That's when they started using that was the read option drive. That's when they started using some of the crossing routes, play action. I really did enjoy that drive. I think that was actually the first touchdown of the game where they schemed up a phenomenal wheel route. I genuinely believe that was I'm not gonna say the best drive of the year, but it felt like the most impactful because it started everything off, and that's when they really started rolling. The next one is third down stops to get against Norfolk State, and people don't give them credit for this. Norfolk State was running up and down FAMU. That's facts. Like there's no debating that FAMU was getting ran up and down the field by Norfolk State's offensive line and their running backs. But what we don't point out is the fact that there was multiple third and shorts in which advantage should go to Norfolk State. And FAMU stood up and bowed up, and they stopped them on those plays. I thought that they got a little bit predictable with their offensive play calling, if you're looking at Norfolk State. But still, at that point, it didn't matter if it was predictable. At that point, you would say if FAMU and Norfolk State knew the running was coming, advantage still goes to Norfolk State because they have been that dominant. Let's get to the next one, the 2-point conversion. Another thing nobody gives them credit for. Nobody gives FAMU credit for this because at the end of the day, all the emphasis goes on Dawson Odoms. Everybody says, how could Dawson Odoms make that play? How could he decide to go for 2? Well, he could have got it. We don't talk about that. Why didn't he get it? Because FAMU knew they were going to run to the left side of their offensive line. So they stacked up multiple Rattlers to the left side of that offensive line. And then they had Ash made a big play. He had a big play on the offensive right side to blow it up. But let's be very clear. I think that Jalen Daniels was going to have to keep that ball no matter what because there was just too many Rattlers on that side. Would he have seen that? I don't know because you're not really reading the left side of the offensive line in that. You're reading the right defensive end. That's where technically the left defense, the right side of the offense. You're reading the defensive lineman on the other side, right, for this read option. But people don't talk about it. Look, if you hand off that ball, I don't think they go anywhere because it's just too many Rattlers. But then Eric Horn also scraped over the top to ensure the discipline that it required to ensure that Daniels didn't run in for an easy touchdown. I really would have thought that would have been an easy touchdown on paper, but FAMU played it in such a way that it required discipline. It was a big moment, but people only talk about the decision making. How about the execution and the decision making on FAMU's defensive coordinator's part? Okay, so I think FAMU is showing up in all of those moments. I got one more for you. No, actually, I have 2 more. Down 18-7. Offense got extremely easy. You go look at that drive. You go look at that FAMU drive after go look at the FAMU drive after they went down 18-7, and then they ended up making it 18-15. Go watch that drive. Then watch the subsequent drive when they scored again. That was some of the easiest, smoothest, butterest offense I've ever seen. Like it was easy every step of the way. It was limited resistance. That's a pressure moment. And then lastly, they drained the clock twice. I was particularly impressed with how they did it against Norfolk State because against Norfolk State, that wasn't their cup of tea. Speaking of which, I need a cup of tea right now. I'm not gonna lie. Throat kind of hurt. But they need a cup of tea, or they need a cup of tea. It wasn't their cup of tea to just drain the clock, but they did it. Then they came back against Norfolk State, against South Carolina State, and they did it again. That's what you have to look at. When you're looking at the Rattlers, in both of these games, they had the ball with 4+ minutes, and they wound down the clock. That's not a word. Why do you want to say that? Wound down the clock. They drained the clock. They dripped the clock. That's however you want to say it, doggone it. But the point is that FAMU controlled the ball every single step of the way when they needed to. And when they were on defense, they made the stops when they needed to. If you're going to be a championship team, if you're going to be a team that is in the HBCU Elite, which we will discuss in segment 3, if you're going to be that type of team, you have to answer the pressure. You cannot shrink. When a team has you down, you have to respond. When you're in moments when I got to have it, you got to go and get it. And that's what FAMU has done on a repeated basis over these last 2 games. We can talk about, oh, well, penalty this, penalty that. I don't want to hear any of it. FAMU went out there and they played when they needed to. You got it. That's the most impressive thing that they've done. And that poise is something I think that they can carry on going throughout the season. These are little intangibles that when they show you they exist, don't expect them to depart so easily. But let's look at South Carolina State, because I think those little intangibles that we refer to is something that they're missing. I like some of the stuff they did, but that's the one thing I really didn't like. So let's look at that as we continue with Locked On HBCU. Today's episode is brought to you by Ultimate College Football. And listen, I love this game because it allows me to really put myself in the space of a head coach. Because at the end of the day, I'll never have that opportunity. The closest I get to that is telling you I didn't like what that coach called and me being, hey, I would have called this. That's the closest I get to it. But this, or it used to be, now this is the closest that I get to it because I get to open up my phone. Let's see. Do I want to recruit this player? Do I want to hire this part of the coaching staff? Do I want to oversee training camp, hand out scholarships? I'm legitimately running this program. I love every single part of it, right? Because it puts it in my hands. I think I'm kind of a control freak in these kind of ways because these things make me so happy. With that being said, you try your hand at it. Go to ultimate-cfb.com or just go ahead and go to the App Store, Game Store, and Google Play Store, and get the app Ultimate College Football Head Coach. Use the code LOCKEDONCFB to get a free boost in that game store. That way you can get a boost for your program. Go to Ultimate College Football Head Coach and download it today. As we continue rolling on today's episode of Locked On HBCU, I appreciate you for making this your first listen of the day, every day. For your second listen, college football is in full swing. We're here, right? We have primetime games. We have big-time matches. We have upsets. We have everything that you need. The only thing that you're missing is going to check out Locked On College Football with Spencer McLaughlin, because he really is going to make sure that you're taken care of and understanding all of the biggest storylines in college football. But here on Locked On HBCU, it's all about FAMU versus South Carolina State. Tomorrow, we will be looking at Clark Atlanta's big-time victory in some capacity. I don't know what capacity yet, but that was probably one of the biggest wins of the weekend. So I want to make sure that we get to that. But right now, I like what I saw from South Carolina State. The one thing I didn't like is that they don't know how to finish. It's kind of the inverse of what I just said with FAMU in a way, because with FAMU, they know how to respond to pressure. I wouldn't necessarily say that South Carolina State was under a lot of pressure in these moments, but they just didn't know how to get it done in crunch time, which is very similar. It's very similar. I think crunch time is pressure, period. I don't care who you're around or what's going on. That to me is a pressure moment. That is responding to pressure because you have to close out this team. FAMU is a squad, especially in Bragg. FAMU is a squad that you have to finish. Otherwise, you're going to lose the game. I'm not counting out FAMU from what I've seen until there's like 3 minutes left in the game. And they're down 3 scores. That's it. If they're down 3 scores with 3 minutes left, then maybe I'll count them out. I thought that South Carolina State kind of let them off the hook, Denny Green style, because that dropped out route. That was an easy throw. That was on the 3rd down. That was an easy throw. It was an easy catch. It was an easy first down. The ball's supposed to still go. Like, you're supposed to still be draining that clock. Like that because that's where you're at that point. I talk about FAMU doing it, but that's where South Carolina State was at. They were supposed to be draining that clock. What's it called? Then they had a bad overthrow on Eric Phoenix's part on a deep shot. I think that was also in the last 2 possessions. Like, I just didn't love how they closed the game, which is a shame because there was multiple points where I'm like, oh man, this team is performing really well. Like I said in the first segment, there was points in which I said FAMU was losing this game, and I was emphatic in it. It was 18-7 at one point. And you allow FAMU to get a real easy drive off defensively. It was the easiest offense. Where was the resistance at there? Everything that you're talking about FAMU being a pressure player, because it's the first game of the week for South, or first game of the season for South Carolina State, you never really know, okay, what hand did the Bulldogs have in this? I've seen FAMU do it twice now. So I know that they have a part in it, 1,000%. Like, they are a talented team. I will not take that away from them. But what's going on with South Carolina State? Is it just they weren't a match for the talent of FAMU at that moment? Or do they not know how to finish? I'm leaning towards both, but I'm going to lean into the latter for this segment because I lean into the former for the first segment, right? I thought that offensively they had big mistakes randomly. They just had big mistakes. You can't make that overthrow. You can't drop that pass. Eric Phoenix went 12 for 25. It's not a real great stat line. But watching that game, there was multiple moments when I was like, hey, he's got something going here. He's cooking right now. Like, there was multiple moments when I said Eric Phoenix is transitioning to the FCS level much better at South Carolina State than he did at his previous stop. This is the guy I'm like, oh, this is the Benedict College quarterback back with Shinnisberry. Things make sense. That's how I was feeling. The run game, dominant, right? Like these were things where I like what I see. But if you learn how to fit it, and you learn how to finish, this is a team. Right now, you remember I divided the MEAC into tiers. We're gonna have to revisit that. But right now, it's not too much to tell me I'm wrong. But you had Central and you had Howard on the top. You had Morgan. You had South Carolina State in the middle. In the place where I had Morgan and South Carolina State, we're just needing to prove it a little more. These are the things that you have to do to prove it. These are the moments that you have to win. You're 18-7. I don't want to hear about a call here, a call there. Refereeing can be spotty. That's just how it goes. I'm sure FAMU got away with some stuff, but I'm sure South Carolina State did too. The reason you won't hear about South Carolina State getting away with anything is because, A, it may not have been egregious, and then because I did see that. I did think that there was a hold. I think it was a hold. But, like, I thought that there was too many opportunities to just point to that. It's easy to do it, but I thought that there was just too many opportunities. There was no flag that led to the overthrow. There was no flag that led to the dropped catch on third down. These were self-inflicted wounds. There may have been some other wounds, of course, but these were self-inflicted wounds that were heavily influencing the end result. That's just how I look at it, man. If you look at Eric Phoenix and what he did at moments, you say, okay, build on that. Look at the running game, build on that. That was what it was. It was a lot of build on that. And in the first game of a new tenure, I mean, that's not bad. It just so happened to come against FAMU. That makes things different. That makes different when it's MEAC versus SWAC. That makes it different when it's South Carolina State versus FAMU. That makes it different when it's just HBCU competition. I know it's not a conference game, but it surely had the feel of it. FAMU's not in the MEAC anymore, but it surely felt like, okay, we got to get this off. We ain't losing to them too. We're not losing to them. So, yeah, we'll see as we get in there. The MEAC has a long out-of-conference season. So this is not in any means done. It's not in any means something that's just like can't be fixed. But it's like I said in the beginning of or at the end of last segment, I liked a lot about South Carolina State. But the one thing that I don't like, if it doesn't get fixed, that's it. If you don't learn how to finish, you're not going to be a championship team. That's just period. Like, and I do think it can be fixed. It can be fixed this year. It doesn't have to wait until next year. It can be fixed right now. So we'll see how that turns out. As we continue pushing, though, we're going to look at the HBCU Elite. Let's go ahead and look in that tier again. Obviously, we know what MEAC teams are going to be there, but we're also going to look at the SWAC as well because FAMU's place in the HBCU Elite is interesting. I want to look at that as we continue with Locked On HBCU. Today's episode is brought to you by 5 Hour Energy, and 5 Hour Energy is perfect for a late night pick-me-up, right? Let's say it's late right now. I want to get in. I want to stay up for a couple more hours because I have things I want to do. Say I need to really edit up this podcast. 5 Hour Energy is perfect for me. I take it. Let's pretend this was a small, convenient. This is huge. No more lugging something like this around. It's a very small package, right? Very small package that you can take anywhere. Boom. Shot of that. I'm active. We to it. We to it every day. Doesn't matter if it's the watermelon. Doesn't matter if it's the berry. Doesn't matter if it's the grape. Doesn't matter if it's the tropical burst. You have all of these different flavors that are all tasty and all get the job done. So you go ahead and go to 5 Hour Energy. That's the number 5 Hour Energy and download, or excuse me, use the code Locked On CFB. That's Locked On CFB to get 20% off your first order. It's not available with any subscription and it's not available with any other promotions. You just go ahead and go to 5 Hour Energy. Use the code Locked On CFB and get 20% off your first offer. As we're wrapping up today's episode of Locked On HBCU, I appreciate you for making this your first listen of the day, every day, making all the way to segment 3, and I thank you 2 times for that. Thank you. Thank you. Now, that being said, let's look at the HBCU Elite. What is the HBCU Elite? On the MEAC side, it's very easy. I've divided them into tiers. I think that Morgan State is the closest to breaking that threshold, but they're not quite there yet. Still need to see more. I thought that Morgan State, first off, there's not a lot of HBCUs with wins in the SWAC. There's only 2. It's FAMU and Texas Southern. Not saying Texas Southern is part of the elites. I'm just talking about the success of HBCUs at the beginning of the season. I had this all off screen. You had no idea that I was saying it's FAMU and HBCU. FAMU and TSU. I had the 2 all the way off screen. You just looking at my arm extended. But that's what I was doing. I was counting over here, guys. But in the MEAC, Central got a victory. Morgan State got a victory. Delaware State's got a victory. That's half the conference with a victory. I know it's only 3 teams, but that's half the conference. Howard played Rutgers. Norfolk State's 0-2. Who am I missing? I got everybody. Did I? I feel like I said 6 teams. Central has a victory. Delaware State has a victory. Morgan State has a victory. Howard played Rutgers. Norfolk State doesn't have a victory. Who am I forgetting? Oh, South Carolina State. They don't have a victory. I'm counting. I'm like, that's 5. But anyway, point being, let's move on. The HBCU Elite. Central, Howard on the MEAC side. And then on the SWAC, it gets a little bit more expanded. Alabama State, FAMU, Jackson State. I feel like you got to put Jackson State in there. I feel like you do. I don't have too much to say about Jackson State because there's a lot of HBCUs who played at one time, and I was splitting too much time to have a great opinion on Jackson State. I was watching the A&T game. I was trying to watch, I don't remember who else was playing at the time, but I was watching North Carolina A&T versus Wake Forest. I was just watching a multitude of games, and I wasn't focused on Jackson State in the way that I would like to speak about them amongst the elites. But I do know that they played Louisiana Monroe very closely. That being said, you're looking at Central. I saw everything I wanted from them. I saw everything that I wanted from North Carolina Central. And was body running on them a problem? It was definitely a problem. But at the same time, I kind of feel like that could be fixed. It didn't feel like because they did a lot of things right. Body was just better at multiple moments. But they did a lot of things right. And that's what you should look for, especially in first games. You got to look for them to do things right. And I thought Central did that. I expect Walker Harris to perform better than he did in the second half. I saw it in the first half. I don't necessarily know what happened in the second, but I trust him to be better than that. You look at Howard, they played Rutgers. It's not too much you can take from that, but I can take that Kenny Gallup is a dog. I think that his ability close to the line of scrimmage, he performed very well. I think he put up some good tape if we're talking about draft conversations. I thought that Kenny Gallup looked great in his physicality. Real strong translation to a box safety, a strong safety. I hate the term box safety. It's never been used in a real good way. It always has some sort of disrespectful addition to it. But anyway, so I thought Howard was NA, right? Not applicable because they played Rutgers. Now let's go to the SWAC. Alabama State, this is going to confuse people, but I didn't walk away disgusted with Alabama State. I walked away disgusted with the offensive decision at quarterback. Offensive. That's really what it was. I felt like it was disrespectful to us as fans to see that. Just because the answer was so obvious and it kept being denied. But when you go through that team, if O'Brien is the quarterback, I still need to see more. I'm not going to rule them out yet, but he didn't look good. If Body's the quarterback, well, you know how I felt. If Body was the quarterback, nothing has changed in that. I thought that the offensive line showed flashes, and it's about, okay, I've talked around, it seems like they just have to get their groove. They've shown good things, but they just have to learn how to work as a unit. Okay, cool. On that defensive side of the ball, I still believe in a linebacker duo. North Carolina Central did not test their cornerbacks, period. They just didn't. The cornerbacks had an easy day, right? Like, despite Walker Harris having a strong first half, that was not on the cornerbacks. They attacked the middle of the field, a beautiful throw. I think Burgess was the closest defender on one big pass, but it didn't necessarily look like he was in coverage. I think it may have been just a zone in the hole in the zone again. But they were attacking the middle of the field. They were putting the linebackers in confusing spots, but they did not attack the cornerbacks. I still expect defensive backs to be a strong suit for Alabama State. I still expect the linebackers to be a strong suit for Alabama State. That defensive line, they got through multiple times. Alabama State just needs to learn how to tackle and get the right quarterback in. If they do those two things, I still believe they can be everything I thought they were before. They showed me that. FAMU, I don't like who they faced. Norfolk State, I do not think is going to be a great team in the MEAC. South Carolina State, I think is going to be a solid team in the MEAC. When you're comparing that to Alabama State and playing Central, I think is a different conversation. It's a different level of play. That doesn't take away from anything that FAMU's done. I've still been very impressed. I still love their poise. They didn't dominate, right? So it's not as if they're just crushing these lower competition, but they're winning impressively. They're showcasing certain intangibles that I love a lot. They're definitely showing me that they deserve to be contenders. I just don't know if I'm like, okay, yeah, I got to jump them over Alabama State, despite the fact that they're 2-0. I think it's still, I need to see more. And I may not know what to feel until I see them in SWAC play, to be honest. Because I know the next game against Miami, and I think the next game is another FBS opponent. So I may not know exactly how to feel about FAMU. You would probably have to put them higher on a power ranking because they are 2-0. They've had nice victories, but, we'll see. That's going to be confusing. That little race, I think the gap is non-existent. I'll say that. I thought it was I had Alabama State, maybe a slight gap, FAMU. Now it's non-existent. They're even. So if you didn't have the same starting point that I had, you probably have a different point now too. So that's the HBCU Elite. That's where FAMU stays in it or ranks in it. I'm not going to do rankings per se, but that's where FAMU sits within the Elite, especially within the SWAC. They're right there. And with a strong performance and if Alabama State struggles again, FAMU may just jump because of that. That's how I feel. Power rankings probably would put FAMU, but I'm not doing power rankings. I'm doing a little bit different. I'm evaluating the HBCU Elite. So I hope you continue to check me out as we do cool topics like this. This was pretty cool. And tomorrow, I'll try to get something Clark Atlanta related in. So from everydayers, and we'll also do rankings because the rankings are back. And we do those on Wednesdays. So in the meantime, in between time, until next time that we hear each other, family, take care, stay blessed. Peace.